Hello everyone, in this video we are going to discuss about the concept of check captures threat. It is a basic fundamental concept in chess that helps you to understand how should you try to resume the game, how should you try to play the game in any particular position. So the concept name is check captures threat. It's a very popular fundamental and many of the subscribers have commented me that I should try to make a video on this particular topic. So today I am finally back with this particular topic. We are going to discuss two critical positions to try to understand the fundamental of check captures threat. It is going to be very interesting, so I don't want to waste any further time. So let's quickly jump into the video. So in this position, we are playing with the white pieces, and here our opponent with the black pieces plays the move g4. So what's happening in this position, and how should we try to resume this position, or how should we try to analyze this position? So after g4, what's happening in this position? After g4, our opponent is simply attacking our knight as well as attacking our pawn on h3. And second, our opponent wants to open up some files on our king so that he can land some deadly attack on our king. So that's what our opponent's idea is in this position. So how should we try to continue this position or resume this position? What are the options? So in this position, the fundamental, which is check captures threat, come into the game. In this position, we should always first try to understand, is there any checks available in any position? So after g4, how can I give check to my opponent? After g4, there are two ways that I can possibly give checks to my opponent. One is knight into f6, giving a check, and second is knight into c7 check. I would like to discard the move knight into c7 because black can simply capture the knight, and it's no point of sacrificing the knight. So the most obvious move is to play the move knight into f6 and give a check. But after knight into f6 check, black can happily capture the knight back, and in this position, black queen is actually extremely happily placed on f6, helping black to attack the opponent's king, to attack our king. So it's not a good idea already to capture the knight in this position. So this is how I can start with a check. The second part is captures. So are there any captures available in this position? So there are two captures that I see that are available in this position, which are bishop into c5 capturing the bishop, or h into g4. So these are the two options. First, let's try to start with heavy pieces like bishop into c5, because bishop is worth 3 points. After bishop into c5, now black is having two options. I would say three options that black can resume the game: g into c5, knight into d5, and g into f3. Knight into d5, I don't think it looks like a good option. So there are, I guess, two good options for black to resume the game. Here, if black plays simply capturing the bishop, like d into c5, here we should try to resume from the start. Now, in this position, is knight into f6 possible? Still, I don't think it's really possible because queen into f6 and it's again the same position. Second, are there any captures? Yes, indeed, there is h into g4 available. H into g4. After h into g4, black will play bishop into g4, because here black is having two ways to capture the g4 pawn. But I guess bringing the maximum pieces into the game is the way you should try to play the chess. So bishop into g4, I sense, is the best move in the position for black. And in this position, the position is very equalish, I would say. Now white can continue the move like knight e3, trying to get rid of the bishop and try to get rid of this dangerous spin. So this is how you can try to continue. So this is one way if black captures the bishop. If black goes other way, like g into f3, after g into f3, we can already try to think, now is knight into f6 working? I guess still it's not really working. So can I move my bishop back? If I try to move my bishop back in this position, f into g2 is the move. So it's not really a good idea because my king is extremely weak. So before I try to think, should I try to move my bishop back? First, I must think about the captures idea, because check captures come second. So here, can I capture the pawn with the queen? And after queen into pawn, the basic here is black is having two ways to continue the position: knight into d5 and d into c5. Okay, so here if d into c5, black captures the piece, here we can already think of capturing the knight in this position. Here again, white is having two ways to capture the knight, with the knight or with the queen. But the smallest difference here is, after knight into f6, we also give a check, so it's always an advantage. And second important thing, that whenever you are attacking, try to keep the heavier pieces on the board, like the queens. Queens are the most powerful pieces in the game of chess. So whenever your opponent's king is weak, try to put your queen on the board. So knight into f6 check, the king is forced to move, and now material wise the position is even, but your opponent's king is extremely weak, so you're already having a good position. So this is how you can continue the position. So this is how what happens if black plays the move g into f3. So yeah, this is what happens after g4 if you try to capture the bishop. So now let's try to discuss what happens if you try to capture the pawn in this position. If you try to capture the pawn, again black is having three ways to continue the position: knight into d5, bishop into g4, or bishop into e3. If knight into d5, I don't think it's a good idea, because here white can already start with e into d5, trying to hit this knight. And once this knight moves, now we can already think of maybe capturing this bishop, because after pawn takes, we can even capture the pawn on e5, and white is having a good position. So this is how you can simply try to calculate with check captures threat. So with knight into d5 is not a good idea. So can black play the move bishop into e3? After bishop into e3, white can play the move f into e3. And now what's happening? Definitely, black can capture the pawn on g4 with the bishop, but the smallest difference in this position here is white is having an active rook on f1, and this can help white to impose some heavy problems on the f-file and can land some serious attacks. So it's not a good idea for black to capture the bishop. So finally, black captures the pawn on g4. After bishop into g4, now are there any checks available? Yes, knight into f6, but I don't think it's really working. After queen into f6, black is the one having a good position, so check is not really working. So are there any capture? Yes, indeed there is bishop into c5, but after d into c5, again I don't see much happening in the position. Coming to the third part, which is threat. Can I really try to impose some threats in the position? So if we try to understand this position, can I play the move bishop to g5 in this position? Because after bishop to g5, my idea here is I'm simply pinning up the knight on f6. Knight is a double attack, and the knight on f6 can't really be protected again. So eventually, if you try to think of this position now, white is completely winning because the piece is trapped, and white is going to be a piece up and going to win the game. So after bishop g5, let's take a random move like rook to g8. Black's idea here is black wants to capture the bishop. But here, again, white is having two ways to capture the knight, with the bishop or with the knight. Always start with check. So if I try to capture the knight with the knight, I also impose the check. So definitely it is a good idea to capture with the knight. After knight to f6, black is having two ways to continue the possession. Let's take king f8. And after king f8, many beginners would like to simply go for heavy pieces like capturing the rook. Definitely it's a good move. But after queen into g5, it definitely you can capture the queen, takes, and the possession is winning. But a much better idea at the place of capturing the rook in this position here is always start with a check. So can you really try to impose some checks in this position? I guess yes. I can play the move knight to h7 check. There is a check, and the good thing about this position here is on the next move, I'm simply going to capture the queen. So after king g7, I can happily capture the queen, and I'm having a queen up, and it's completely winning position for black, having no counter chances. So this is how you should try to continue the position. Always start with check, then captures, and then threat. So this is how you should try to continue the position. This is what happens if your opponent plays the move bishop into g4. So this is the third way you can capture the pawn on g4. So now let's try to assume that if h into g4 is not really a good idea, what are the other options? I can move my knight in this position. I'm having ways to move my knight. Knight to h4, knight to h2, knight to d2, knight to e1. or even knight to g5 can be a possibility. So in this position, let's check a random move like knight to h4. After knight h4, our opponent will capture the pawn maybe, and after pawn takes, again we must start with the starting process, which is check captures threat. Start with knight into f6. Is it a good idea? After queen into f6, I don't think it's a good idea because the queen that actually at a very good square. Hitting this knight, our king is weak and black is having a very comfortable position. So it's not a good idea. Second, any captures. I can play bishop into c5. I can play g into h3. G into h3, not a good idea because it weakens up my king. Bishop into h3 can come in, attacking the rook. Rook g8, attacking the king. Already not a good idea. So if I don't really like any ideas of capturing, can I impose any threats? Yes, I can. I can play the move bishop to g5, trying to pin this knight. And again, the theme is the same. The knight cannot move and it doesn't matter what black does. Like h into g2, you can simply play the move knight into f6, starting with a check. You are piece up. On the next move, you can capture the pawn with the knight. You are already winning this position. So this is how even the top grandmaster, even in complex position, by using this fundamental of check capture threat, they can find out moves like bishop into g5. I'm pretty sure that if you have seen this position in a game of grandmaster, you would have thought like bishop g5, the position is so complicated, how could have they even find the move bishop g5? But this is all about check capture threat. Check is not working, captures is not working. Can they really impose a threat? Indeed, they can after playing bishop to g5 and winning a piece. So this is how, after g4, you can simply move your knight. It's an option. So coming to the last part, which is threat. Can you really impose any threats in the position? Knight h4 is a move. But for an assumption part, if knight h4 would have been a bad idea, are there any good threats that I can impose in black's position? Yes, there is. Again, in this position, I can play the move bishop to g5. And the idea is still the same. I want to capture the knight. So for example, if black captures the knight, thinking that black is a piece up, here we can already think that white is having two ways to capture the knight, with the bishop or with the knight. Definitely, if I try to capture the knight with the bishop, I'm hitting the queen as well as the rook, and I'm going to be a rook up and just going to be winning position. But always start by check. Knight into f6 comes with a check, so always try to give it a note. Knight into f6 check, black's having two ways to go, and it doesn't matter where the black king goes. After knight king to f8, I can simply capture the knight into h7, again giving a check and simply capturing the queen on the next move and winning the queen. And if king e7, I can already play the move knight to d5 check, and it's a double check. The king is forced to move, and I can simply capture the queen and winning the game. So this is how you can simply, with the fundamentals of check capture threat, simplify any position. Try to find any correct answer of any position. It doesn't matter how complex the position is. So this was the first diagram, very interesting one. I hope that you guys have loved it. So now let's move on to the second position. Okay, so we have the second position on our board. This time again we are playing with the white pieces. It's black to play, and black continues the game with knight to f6. And what's the idea? The idea here is black wants to trade off as many pieces as possible because black is having a very bad position. All the pieces are on the last rank. So after knight into f6, so after knight to f6, the most natural move in any of player's mind is to can I trade off the queen? Because it also starts with a check. It's definitely a possibility. Let's resume this position from the start. Let's start with any checks. Are there any checks available? Queen into d8 is a check. King into d8. Now, can I try to impose any checks? I don't think there are any checks available. So coming to the second part, captured. So I'm having two options to capture the position: bishop into g8 or bishop into c8. Bishop into g8 is already a bad idea after rook into g8 because black is having the bishop pair now, which actually compensate for the isolated e pawn, and black is having a fine position in the position despite black can no longer castle. But because of the bishop pair, it's an open position. It gives a good attacking chances to black. So it's not a good idea to capture the knight. Can I capture the bishop? After bishop into c8, black can already capture the bishop back, and I don't see any checks available in this position. any captures in the position. So can I impose any threats in the position? Yes, I can. I can play the move knight to e5. And my threats is to play the move knight to f7 check, capturing the rook, or knight to g6, attacking the rook and also capturing the bishop at the same time. So these are the threats I'm trying to impose on my opponent's position, which is a good idea to continue the game, and which is actually the best move in the position. So this is one way you can try to resume this position. The second position is, are there any further checks available despite queen to d8? Yes, if you try to think of deeply, there is a check with bishop to f7 check. After bishop f7 check, what's the idea? Basically, the king is forced to capture the bishop because everything is blocked up. So after checking into f7, I can happily capture the queen. And the point here is, I'm simply a queen up, and the position is already winning. So this particular theme of bishop to f7 check is also known as deflection. You are basically forcing your opponent to move your king, and so that we can simply capture the heavy piece of your opponent, and it's completely winning position. So yep, this is another way that you can simply win the position on the spot, starting with check. So coming with the captures part, for example, let's take queen into d8 takes, and in this position, definitely you are having two options to continue the game. But to be true, both the options are not the best moves. The reason is, it's not always the best idea to capture. You should always try to capture only on your terms, because you must notice one thing, that whenever you try to capture your opponent piece, your opponent captures the piece back and actually helps your opponent to develop the pieces. So it's not always a good idea. So in this position, at the place of capturing a piece, you can actually pull your bishop back, because in this position, your bishop is at its powerful square, covering all the light squares, and your threats could be to play the move knight to e5, knight f7 check, try to attack the king and the rook at the same time. Whereas the bishop on c8 is not at a very good square. It's feeling uncomfortable. So that's the idea. It's not always compulsory for you to capture the pieces if it is available. You should always try to capture on your own terms. Always allow your opponent to trade off the pieces, because it helps your pieces to develop. You should always try to capture when it only helps you in a tactical way, or it gives you a better position. It makes your opponent into an isolated pawn structures or weak pawns, 2 pawns on the same line, 3 pawns on the same line. It should give you an advantage only if you're trading off the pieces on your opponent's show. So yeah, this is how you can try to start with captures. And yeah, that's it for today. You should always try to start with check, captures, and threat. This is a complete concept that I've tried my best to explain you guys with check, captures, threat. If you learned anything new in this particular video, then make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. I'm going to come up with these exciting videos like this. You can tell me in the comment box below of what topic you want a video on. I'm going to come up with that particular video. So I'm going to see you soon. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess.